Hi, my name is Mr. Milton, and today we're going to be looking at the Scramble for Africa. And just so we're clear, obviously, I'm not in school. And the other fun thing to note is that I didn't bring my power cord, and so I'm kind of running low. So this is going to be a one take thing. So hopefully it'll work out. Wish me luck. Okay, so terms to know before obviously imperialism is going to be a good term. It's a policy in which a strong nation seeks to dominate another country politically, economically, and socially. Um, and then the other term is social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is the application of Darwin's ideas of using evolution and survival of the fittest to human societies, and it's going to be used to justify imperialism. Uh, just so we know, social Darwinism is often used as a fake scientific way to justify racism in general, and it definitely is racism. We only see you'll often see like social Darwinism and fascism linked. When Darwin wrote Origin of the Species in 1858, after traveling the world cataloging different animal species, that's where the term Darwinism comes from. And then people started to apply that to humans, the human development. Um, Darwin actually was not a social Darwinist at all. He did not believe that you could rank the human race like you could rank species. Um, but the concept that the weak should be controlled by the strong, like the whole survival of the fittest, that's really like people who are, yeah, it's they're using something to justify why some people are better than others. Some people are more rightfully able to rise up. And so you're going to find that Nazism, fascism, racism, imperialism, eugenics were all based upon social Darwinism, but it's junk. Um, Again, the definition of imperialism, but imperialism isn't a new thing, obviously. The Europeans were imperializing from the 15th to 19th century when they were kind of establishing trade posts throughout the world. Um, and then with this new imperialism, it's going to really focus on territorial expansion and exploiting resources. And obviously, this is going to be very much fueled by industrialization and nationalism. The first old imperialism was focused on the Americas, India, and then trading posts in the West Indies. And new imperialism is going to be focused on Africa, India, and South Asia. Um, and this isn't just settling new lands. This is just settling a colonists in an area to kind of live. This is to dominate politically, socially, economically, and culturally, as we'll find out through the course of the unit. So this was European imperialism in 1800, and obviously you note that it's probably very close to like you see South America, and obviously you know that South America is going to become independent. But we're going to be looking at Africa, and you can see that like the Europeans really have not made it into Africa in 1800, and there's some reasons for that. And part of it is because they would often get sick with they couldn't survive. Their horses would get sick, and there's some diseases impacting horses, and then malaria. They couldn't survive in Africa, but in South America, they found this plant called the cinchona plant, and that helped them develop quinine. And quinine would stave off the symptoms of malaria. Quinine, if you ever had like a tonic water, like an actual tonic water, that's quinine's in it, but it would have been in much higher quantities. And if you ever worked at a restaurant and you push the T instead of an S on the soda squirt gun on the soda button, you might mistakenly have tried tonic water. And this is by 1945. You'll find that obviously much of Africa is going to be colonized. Um, so how did it happen? So obviously, come on, come on, Michael. There we go. There were new travel technologies. We have the steamships, the railroads, and canals. Steamships allowed them to go into the rivers, which they really couldn't before. And so now they're able to go. The Europeans are able to go upstream. So the steamships are super important. New communication technologies like telegraph wires can be super important in industrializing Africa. The Maxim machine gun is a huge weapon technology due to the Industrial Revolution because prior, the Africans and the Europeans are actually fairly evenly matched weapon-wise. But the Max machine gun, it shot a lot of bullets, and that allowed them to win battles. There's an old there's a poem called like it's called like the Modern Traveler by Henry Belloc, and it says, "Whatever happens, he has got the Maxim gun, and they have not." I should have written that quote down somewhere. The Max machine gun could shoot 11 bullets per second. It outperformed rifles and muskets. And most African resistance fighters they had older technologies. And so they weren't able to compete with the Maxim machine gun. But they did put up a heck of a fight. And so we're going to be looking not really about how they did it. We're really going to be looking at why, what factors motivated the Europeans. And really, this guy's kind of important to it. This is King Leopold of Belgium. And so I think this is a pretty interesting statement. He says, "Our frontiers cannot be extended in Europe. Colonies are useful since they make a great part of what makes up the power and prosperity of states. Let us see whether on occupied lands to prove to the world that the Belgians are an imperial people capable of dominating and enlightening others." That enlightening others thing makes you think, and we'll get there. We're going to break down this quote, but it's a pretty interesting quote. Take a moment with it. What's he saying? What's motivating him? Why does he want to colonize when he starts to? So Leopold in the Congo. So Leopold establishes. Okay. Leopold establishes the Congo as a personal colony. It is ruled by him and him alone, not by, he's the king of Belgium, but it's not by Belgium. But he enlisted the help of a Henry Stanley. Henry Stanley was a news reporter who was in the region for a while. He was tracking down Dr. Livingston. We'll look at him later. And he was able to work with some of the people, to the Congolese, to sign over their rights to Leopold, and we'll look at some of those. That's pretty sketchy. Leopold says that his goal was to Christianize the Congolese and to end the slave trade, but his focus was the rubber industry. That's what this whole thing was. And the treatment of the Congolese working in the rubber industry was abhorrent. About 10 million people died as a result of mistreatment here. And when word got around to Europe and to Belgium about what was happening, how many people were dying as a result of Leopold in this industry, they ended up, he lost the Congo. Or as a personal property, it actually became taken over by Belgium. And so the country that he was in charge of controlled it rather than a personal property. You can look at the legacy of Leopold later. He's a very, he's a pretty devastating figure in terms of, 10 million people are died as a result of him. But what he ends up doing, since he started to get those treaties, and he started to take over Africa, the rest of the Europeans were like, well, wait a second. We also want territory. And to avoid infighting, they decided to have a meeting in Berlin. It's called the Berlin Conference from 1884 into 1885. And this is actually how you get most of the borders in Africa at this meeting. And if you look around at the people at this meeting, you'll probably note that they're all from Europe. There is actually, the United States is there, but Africans were not at all part of what made the borders, how the borders in Africa were made. It was made at this meeting in Berlin. And it should be noted that the Europeans hadn't even been inside the interior of Africa at this point, but yet they're making a map and dividing it up. So again, the meeting lasts from 1884 to 1885. To claim the land in Africa, the European powers had to notify the other nations, and they had to show it could control the area. Countries with territories, obviously, Belgium has the Belgian Congo, which is right there in purple on this little map here. Britain is going to end up with orange is Britain on this map. And so South Africa, we'll get to that story a little bit later, but you can see that they have like Egypt. There's a lot of territory for Britain. France as well. France has French West Africa. You've done a map on this, so you know. Portugal is also as colony. Spain has a colony. There are two independent nations. One is Ethiopia, and you're going to be taking a look at them a little bit later because it's kind of a cool story. The other is Liberia. Liberia is actually the only thing the United States really wanted. They wanted to make sure there was a free, independent country in Africa. and they wanted to make sure Liberia was there, and that's so. The idea was that perhaps they could send former enslaved people to Africa, to Liberians. That was this Back to Africa movement that the government was trying to launch. In terms of motives for imperialism, why the Europeans are doing it, obviously the Industrial Revolution is a huge part of it. But we've done this thing where we kind of break down some of the motives, looking at the economic motive, the desire to make money. So looking for raw materials, super important, and new markets, super duper important. That's people who have to buy your stuff. So if you're in control of a country, they have to buy all your stuff. They can't buy stuff from other places, and so that ends up really servicing the imperializer. Geopolitical, the desire to gain worldwide power, to gain prestige, to boost national pride. Access to build canals, I guess, is also kind of a big deal here. You want to show that you can do it to the other European nations. Belgium said they want to prove to the world that they are people who can do this. And so you have like this geopolitics that's playing. And there's also other parts of geopolitics we'll get into later. Ideological. So this is that social Darwinism that we're looking at. It's the belief of Europe's cultural superiority. They're going to say they want to civilize the primitive people, which again is very racist. Um, yeah, and we'll be looking at more of this later on in class when I'm there, hopefully. There's a religious motive too. Part of it was to end Christianity, to promote European values, and to end the slave trade. And so we are going to see the first wave of people going over are missionaries, and so a lot of them are going to, establish a mission and try to convert people. And then there's the exploratory to figure out what's there. They don't know what new stuff is there. They didn't know that in Latin America they could find this cinchona plant that could cure malaria or stave off the influence of malaria, symptoms of malaria. Who knows what they could find? And so these are kind of the reasons that we look at when we are discussing the reasons why. And since we're really clever, and we didn't make this up, there's this acronym that we use to remember them. It's EMPIRE: economic, political, ideological, religious, exploratory. And the M stands for nothing. Economic, political, ideological, exploratory. Religious and exploratory. And that's all they are right there. I'd make sure to grab those. It's probably a good thing to grab. So if you want to look at this statement again, look at it and then write down like which motives are present in this. And there's a few in there. I've already mentioned one. But yeah, take a look at it. I'm not doing that bad with time. Okay. So the results, obviously, Africa by 1914 is largely going to be controlled by Europe, by European powers. They don't go without a fight by any means, and there's lots of resistance. And I shared with you that map, the resistance map, for you to look at. There's also other ways that resistance happened.